Councilwoman Moreno.
Thank you so much, Barry. I scooted over a little so we have enough room so I could speak into the mic without my mask. But first of all, good afternoon to all of you. It's great to be with you. My name is Helena Moreno. I'm president of the New Orleans City Council. I'm also a former legislator and former chair of the Louisiana Legislative Women's Caucus. So I'm really proud to be with all of you and really proud of the women of the Legislative Women's Caucus because you all are the ones stepping up to deal with this very important issue and matter. So I initially wanted to come here to, of course, address the report and talk about just how appalling and sickening that it really is. But I also wanted to tell you about a lot of the work that the legislature did back in 2014 and 2015 on this matter. Yes, it is very much deja vu. And talk to you about Act number 172. You've heard a lot about Act 172, and after hearing everything that I heard today, we might as well just rip up this act because universities have not followed what the legislature initially put in place. We put these policies in place to protect our students. We worked through task forces and through the Board of Regents and one policy after the next, study after study after study. And thoughtful experts from across the country came and told us about best practices, and we put them in this act only for it to be completely ignored. This whole issue about the MOU that hasn't been, signed or not signed or whatever, and they're not sure what LSU is doing with the MOU with law enforcement, that was in this 2015 legislation. I also want to mention, too, that, Senator Mizell, you talked about Dr. Henderson and the policy that he mentioned about how students who are transferring to other universities, if they have a pending investigation on some type of sexual misconduct, that those transcripts cannot just be released, right? Well, that's great that he put in place that policy, but that was also in the 2015 legislation, Act 172. So why didn't he know? So, just a quick, little bit of other matters that I just want to mention about what I heard today, because like I said, I can go back and talk about the whole history of everything that we did, but why does it even matter anymore? Because it's like not being enforced or no one seems to care. The apology that I just heard from Mr. Galligan, let me speak briefly about that. Mr. Galligan says that he apologizes to the victims. Is he apologizing because he's sorry for what happened to them? Or is he apologizing because the university failed to follow policies and procedures that were in place that may have prevented what happened to them? Which is it? We talk about this culture that has been at LSU, and that's what's being blamed for all of this now, right? This culture. That was at LSU, and that this culture is now going to change, right? That's what we've been hearing all day. We've been here all day. So if this culture is really going to change, well then why aren't we seeing significant action now, right? A couple employees suspended? Are you kidding me? Does that sound like the culture is changing? We heard about the line being drawn in the sand, and Mayor Warner, I love Mary, I think she's fantastic, but if we're talking about the line being drawn in the sand, then you fire these individuals and you clean house. You clean house of all of those who are protecting the culture. That, my friends of the Women's Legislative Caucus, that is what it means to change the culture. So now let's talk about, what I think could be possible next steps, just based on what I heard today. Clearly, oversight. Who's watching? Over these universities, institutions, making sure that they're really following the policies. Oversight. Maybe it is this committee. Maybe, Madam Chair, it is this committee. Or maybe you all form another commission. I can tell you that when we had a task force formed in 2014 that created Act 172 and mandated that universities create policies on harassment and on sexual misconduct, when that task force was live and active and the media was covering it, things were happening. So somehow, somewhere, I think it really should be through the legislature, there needs to be some type of oversight committee. to really look at a variety of different things. First, the recommendations in the report that LSU released, in these series of recommendations, you actually should implement these in every single one of the institutions, every one of the higher ed institutions across the state. These are really good recommendations, and bottom line, if LSU needs to follow them, why not everyone else? So I think you start there. I think on the quarterly reports for claims of harassment, assault, discrimination, why not have all universities do quarterly reports and also release those to the legislature as well? On the climate surveys, I can go on and on about climate surveys, but I can tell you that when we were pushing climate surveys back in 2014 and 15, there was a lot of resistance by universities. A lot. They were like, it's going to cost too much. It sounds like a pain. I don't know if we really want to do this. And clearly, from what we've seen, if it's correct that the Board of Regents says that they only had 2 and that there was 5% reporting, well, right. Clearly, there wasn't a big effort to get it done. I can tell you that Tulane University does climate surveys. They do it every several years. And they have a 47%, not 5% like we heard from Board of Regents, but 47% participation rate. The reason why is because they incentivize students to take these types of surveys. They coordinate with the sororities and fraternities, and they're in the student union and all of those. They make it a priority because, once again, this whole matter that we're talking about today is not just about leadership. It's about protecting victims from sexual assault, discrimination, and harassment, a priority. And maybe it's because mostly it impacts women that it usually is not a priority. So let's just speak truth about that. The other thing, too, that as we look at oversight, you review staffing. I heard Representative Landry and others talk about that. And then, at the end of the day, accountability. Of course, it's about holding the offenders accountable, but what about holding accountable the leaders of universities who fail to protect their students? How do we hold them accountable? How do you all, the legislature, hold them accountable? They failed to protect their students. Students got hurt. They didn't follow policies. They didn't follow their own rules. They didn't follow the law. They broke laws. How do you hold the leaders of these universities accountable? And that, my friends, is up to you all to decide. Thank you so much for your time, and I very much appreciate seeing all of you today.
Thank you, Madam Councilwoman. It's so good to see you here, and we appreciate your patience. And
I'm here to help for whatever you need, too.
Well, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. Representative Ivey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I wasn't really planning on speaking. I will say that this is a very difficult subject to maintain composure on. I'm a father of 4. I've got 2 daughters. Any father knows what this is, what this means. It is a tragedy, and I'm going to kind of prepare a statement to kind of stay on track. So as one of 144 members of the Louisiana State Legislature, I would like to personally apologize to the victims for the failure of their government to protect them or to provide them justice for our failure to date. I have not yet completed my own due diligence on the issue, which will be extensive, so I will try to limit my comments to what I believe to be abundantly clear from a common sense perspective. LSU is our flagship university. I'm an alumni. And before I offer any criticism, I would like to point out that it is unfortunate that this issue has cast a long shadow over the entire university. Not only has LSU failed the victims, but they've also failed every student, faculty member, parent, donor, and taxpayer in our state. I personally believe that when something isn't done correctly, or a failure has occurred by an individual or an organization, that there are only 2 possible reasons to account for the failure. It is because someone didn't know, or it's because they didn't care. What has come to light is that a culture was allowed to exist that did not care about our children. The leadership of any organization, public or private, is responsible for setting the standards of excellence which it expects those under its authority to adhere to. As a father of four, I have learned early on that undesirable behavior I see from my children will always be limited to the extent that I tolerate that behavior. And just like I am responsible for the behavior of my children, as legislators, we are ultimately responsible for setting the standards for what behavior we will tolerate. When the conduct of university staff or faculty is judged by one standard and students are judged by a separate set of standards, we create a double standard. I'm personally aware of specific instances of the consequences of student behavior in a much less egregious nature, resulting in 2 years of expulsion from the university. And here we have a scenario where these are egregious violations of trust, of public trust, and it amounts to slaps on the wrist. That's a double standard, and our children are watching us. If we fail to take the appropriate action, I am very concerned about what that failure will teach our children. With so many people watching, will a failure to take appropriate action ultimately perpetuate the problem we are trying to address? Do we empower someone to victimize someone else, a current student? Do they feel that they can get away with that type of behavior because it's tolerated at the very highest levels of our state institutions? I have close family members who have been victims of sexual assault as minors, and I know And I know what happens when they feel that no one answered their cries for help. If we fail to deliver justice for these victims, they are victimized again, and we will be the ones responsible for that. And it's not going to happen on my watch. And I appreciate the effort and attention that y'all have given to this issue. And I know that this is only the beginning. We must take decisive action. We must expect our university leaders to take the proper action. Please don't make us make you. Why don't do the right thing? I understand it's a difficult task to properly bring real accountability to those that are your people who are your colleagues and you have relationships with. The relationships that we have with each other should never supersede the responsibility that we have to our children in protecting them. It's a zero tolerance policy, in my opinion. The gross misconduct that has been demonstrated should receive a zero tolerance policy. It's what I expect, and so I appreciate y'all's time and look forward to working with y'all.
Thank you so much, and I do appreciate it, and thank you for coming down here and being a part of this process, and I appreciate your intentionality to be with us as we stand to ensure that this issue is addressed properly.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. All right.